Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, researchers develop a way to protect your passwords after they've been stolen, the little credit card scam that's making big money, and then it's a great big batch of your questions, a rockin' roundup, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. And welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 156 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on April 3rd, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and iXsystems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Alan, 156 episodes, and we've not missed a single week. That brings us at our three-year anniversary. That's kind of amazing when you think about that. It's 3 Christmases and 3 New Years and different Thanksgivings.
6 Thanksgivings.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty wild. And 100% uptime the whole dang time. And, you know, we should probably, now that it's April, start mentioning that at the end of the month, Alan's going to be at Linux Fest Northwest in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. So if you're going to go to Linux Fest, you can stop by and say hi to Alan. Mm-hmm. And there may be some in-studio shenanigans. We'll find out.
I'll be at the BSD table throwing things at Chris at the Linux table.
Well, if they arrange it like they did last year, you'll literally be like right next to us. So,
well, that'll make it much easier to throw things at you.
Yeah. You won't have to worry about your aim because we'll be right there live, and we'll be on camera, and you'll be able to hit us with crap and probably horns and whatnot, I would imagine.
Well, we have the stress balls with the little horns.
Yeah, you guys. Always in there infiltrating with your BSD messages. That's all I have to say about that, Alan. Well, we got a big show today. Coming up, we're going to talk a little about some researchers at NYU that developed a poly pass hash, making it harder to crack password stores when they leak, right? That's pretty interesting. We got a great batch of feedback, including a couple of suggestions about who should play Alan in a movie about Alan Jude's technical adventures, I guess. I don't know. For anybody watching live, go over to links.techsnap.tv. You have a few more minutes to put some more suggestions in there. You have a better chance of getting featured, too, if you include a picture, because I like pictures. So that'd be good. Before we start...
And, also if you have a justification why you think that person...
Oh, I guess that should work too, huh? Or maybe like a YouTube clip of that actor's like best Alan Jude moment.
We can't go through all those as easily as just pictures, but yeah.
That's true. But I'd love somebody having an Alan Jude moment. That'd be really good. Well, all right, why don't I thank our first sponsor this week, and that is DigitalOcean, brand new sponsor to the TechSNAP program. What is DigitalOcean? You guys have got to go check out DigitalOcean. It's simple cloud hosting dedicated to offering the most intuitive way to spin up a cloud server. Users can create their own cloud server in 55 seconds, and pricing plans start only $5 per month, which gets you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, and Amsterdam. They have a simple interface, an intuitive control panel, and power users can replicate it on a larger scale with their straightforward API. They have been just blowing up lately, and they're huge in the developer community, but also I've been using them for infrastructure backend for Jupiter Broadcasting as well, and some of the largest sites on the web run on DigitalOcean. I think a big part of their secret sauce is very early on, they said, we're going to go SSD only. And if you think about, like, for a startup company, that especially a few years ago, that was a huge investment on their part, and it has paid off big time. The other thing DigitalOcean has done that I really appreciate is they have made a firm commitment to 99.99% uptime. They guarantee it. I've never had an outage on my DigitalOcean droplet. They have multiple data center locations to help spread it out, and they partner with Tier 1 network transit providers. Each facility, the connections are 10 gig E to ensure redundancy and capacity. And if you're not already impressed by that, they wrap it all up with this really awesome control panel. I'm showing you right now in the video version, like, this is where you would go to create a new DigitalOcean droplet. You click on here, you give it a name, so let's call this one like TechSnapper. And I enter the host name, I can say how big I want it to be, and they put the pricing right there. It's very clear. It's $5 per month for 512 megs of RAM, CPU, 20 gigabyte SSD, and a terabyte of transfer. All right, that's pretty good. And you see I can go up one notch to $10. I go up another notch to $20. It all is very clear. It makes a lot of sense. So I'll choose the $10 rig, then I choose my region. And I'm going to go with San Francisco, so that way I have a good, quick connection right down to something in California on the West Coast. Then you just choose your distribution you want to deploy. So here's Ubuntu, and they have a whole range of Ubuntu options from 13.10 to 12.04, even 10.04, 32-bit and 64-bit, CentOS, Debian, Arch Linux, Fedora. You can also just deploy applications. So just say, hey, I want a LAMP stack on Ubuntu 12.04, or maybe I want Docker on Ubuntu 13.04, something like that. And you also can build your own images, so that way if you have a template you like, you can redeploy that on a future machine and get things up and running even faster. Maybe you've got PHP installed and MySQL and all the essentials you need. So if you need to spin up a new server, boom, it's nice and quick. Plus, they have backups where you can make a snapshot before you have a mistake, and then you can even create a new machine from that backup snapshot, and you can even recover if you need to delete something for a little bit. It's a really great service. They have simple DNS too, but here's the best part. You can try it for 2 months for absolutely free if you use the promo code SNAPAPRIL. SNAP April will get you DigitalOcean for 2 months, a $10 credit if you get that $5 rig. Just go over to DigitalOcean.com. When you're checking out, use the promo code SNAPAPRIL. That lets them know you heard about it on this show and you appreciate them supporting TechSNAP. And it is not only could you use it for production infrastructure, and lots of people do, but at $5 per month, you can also use it to do self-education, to do experimentation, perhaps things that you might do in a virtual box image that you then have to open up ports on your router and bring into your LAN. Just avoid all of that and put it on a real cloud server with tier 1 bandwidth and SSD drives and bang on it from the public web. And it's a great educational experience because you got that snapshot system. So if you mess something up, you can roll right back. And if you're developing an application or a web app and you want to test it on an actual public server, maybe let other people bang on it, the best way to do it is throw it up on a DigitalOcean droplet. So go over to DigitalOcean.com, and a huge thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Brand new sponsor to TechSNAP, and we're super happy to have them. Okay, Alan, so this first story this week is about this research being done at NYU, right?
Yes, it's poly.edu, which is part of the reason why it's called the Poly Pass Hash.
Ah, all right. So what are they working on?
Yeah, so as we've seen many times now, SQL injection or something happens and a giant database of passwords get leaked, right? We saw LinkedIn, Gawker, Adobe, Sony, et cetera, right? So they're like, well, what can we do to make it so that if someone steals the password database, they wouldn't be able to just sit there and start brute forcing people's hashes.
Right.
So the polypass hash is designed to make it significantly harder to crack a user's password because you would have to crack a bunch of users at exactly the same time in order to get the passwords. So the system uses SSSS, or Shamir Secret Sharing Scheme, which we've talked about a bit before, which basically is a system to take a private key and divide it up into a bunch of shares, pieces of it, and you need at least so many of the shares to reconstitute the key.
Okay.
All right, so it uses really complicated math using polynomials, and basically you can define an infinite number of points on a line, but you need at least so many of those points to be able to figure out what the line is. So the idea is that, say, you can have a secret, you divide it up into 6 pieces, and say you need at least 3 of the pieces in order to decrypt this, right? So it's kind of like it gives you the kind of the 2-man rule, or like saying we need at least 3 of the 6 administrators to agree to do this, so that any 2 can't come up with a scheme to steal all the money or whatever. Right. So the idea is to do the same thing with the password file. So what it would actually do is say each user would be assigned 1 share, and so in order to decrypt the password file, you would have to have 10 users as passwords.
This is kind of genius.
Well, it has some drawbacks too, though.
Oh.
The first one being that means that nobody can log in until 10 users have tried to log in.
That sounds unworkable right there.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of ways around some of that.
Okay.
So one of the advantages to the Shamir sharing algorithm is it's extensible, meaning you can add more keys later on. So that's what it makes it so that you can keep adding users and not have to change everybody's password hash. So the nice thing about this is, or with the whole idea of using this Shamir secret system is, if you have 6 administrators and you need any 3 to do it, when you fire one guy, you don't have to change anybody else's stuff. You just get rid of his share and come up with the other one.
Yeah.
But the other thing about the SSSS algorithm is it's flexible. You can allow certain people, say the administrator, to have more than one share. So instead of needing 10 individual users to enter the right password, if administrators get 5 shares each, then all you need is 2 of however many administrators you have to log in, and then that gives you the 10 shares you need to decrypt the database.
I see.
And so in that case, after a reboot, you just need 2 administrators to log in, and then the password database is online and everybody can start using it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if it's a large-scale system where you're having, many logins per second, then getting to 10 people only takes a couple of seconds. And it's not that big of a deal. But, in some cases, it obviously wouldn't work. They did a reference implementation in Python. Now, this one isn't meant to be really fast or anything. It's actually specifically designed to be easy to read so people can understand how the implementation works.
Okay.
So that's why they chose Python instead of doing it in C. They actually have a second implementation in C that's a little better. But the idea with the Python one is make it so that people can read it and follow along and read the comments and see what's actually happening. In their example, they have the threshold of 10. So you need 10 pieces of the secret in order to verify passwords. And each in their setup, each user is 1 share and the administrator is 5 shares. And they have 3 administrators, so as long as 2 of them log in, then they have enough shares. One of the problems with it currently is that it just uses the SHA-256 hash of a random 16-character salt and the user's password. Right? So that's not the same as a regular salted hash. Right? This is just you take the salt, add it to the password, and hash it. Whereas a cryptographic hash like SHA-256 crypt, that's what like Ubuntu uses. Mm-hmm. In that one, you're taking the salt and the hash and you're doing it 5,000 times. And you're not just doing it 5,000 times, you're scattering, you're mixing the salt in there more and spicing it up and doing a bunch of things to make it harder and specifically to make it take longer. They kind of advertise in the paper that, you can verify a password in like 147 microseconds. Well, sure, on a certain scale, you want to be able to verify a lot of passwords per second. But on the opposite, the whole point of the way we do password hashing on Unix systems is to make it slow on purpose so that someone brute forcing it has to wait. Right? That it takes that long to brute force it.
Does that become less relevant when you have this share-based system where without these shares?
Well, where they claim that it'll take, was it like 5,000 CPU years in order to crack 6 people, needing at least 3 shares on people that have 6-character random passwords. But I don't know how good the math is on that. So I prefer to see them use the regular password hashing we already do and then apply this on top of it.
Right.
Instead of doing this with a weaker version of what we're doing.
Right. Why step back like that?
Yeah, exactly. Like I mentioned, the problem is after a reboot, nobody can log in because we haven't decrypted the password database yet. One of the pros solutions to this is to shorten the key used for the encryption. So what they do there is they take the hash, your password hash, and then they XOR or exclusive OR it with the secret, and that encrypts it. What they're suggesting to do is keeping the key length of your secret shorter. So an SHA-256 is 32 bytes long. So if you made the key for your encryption only 30 bytes, then that would mean that the last 2 characters of the hash wouldn't get encrypted.
Yeah.
And that they call this the partial key. And the idea is that for those first 10 logins, you compare just those last 2 characters of the hash that don't get encrypted. And if they're right, then you let the person log in. That deals with the first 10 people. And then after that, you can decrypt the whole database and work normally. The downside of that is that, if there's only 2 characters of the hash, you only have to guess so many times before you come up with a hash that has the same 2 characters as some other hash.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's some trade-off there. You're shortening the key that you're encrypting the database with. Now, if you maybe switch to SHA 512, so the password was longer, then you could, cut off 4 characters maybe, and you'd still have a stronger encryption key and have less chance of someone entering the wrong password and getting in anyway. But, that's just implementation details. But that compromises the security of the thing because you're giving away the last couple characters of the hash, which gives someone something to start with to try to crack the password.
So I see they have a tar GZ and a zip download. Is this like...
That's the,
is that the
Python and it includes the C as well. They're both there, and they're on the GitHub as well, which I have a link to in the show notes.
I find this to be pretty interesting because
Yes.
Even if you did the solution where you say you divvy up multiple shares to the administrators, even though that kind of compromises the integrity of it a little bit in the sense that you're allocating a lot of power, it sort of does solve the problem where if that username and password database hits the web, you're protected. And that particular problem seems to be the most common issue we're up against.
Especially if your administrators have strong passwords. They do a case study at the very end of the PDF file I linked, where they look at the Sony administrators, which there were about 6, I think. And some of them had really bogus, weak passwords, but some of them had stronger. And they said, if you required at least 4 of the 6 passwords, I think it was, then it would have taken 5,000 CPU years at a billion hashes a second.
Right.
Which is what a really good graphics card can do. If you only required 2, then it would have only taken an hour because those were really weak passwords. And so that raises the other issue. If, say, you're Facebook and you want to use this, it's entirely possible for someone to know 10 Facebook users as passwords.
That's true. And
then he can decrypt the whole database.
But it's still such a higher level of entry than one user. Right. I mean, to me,
normally in the system, you'd have these hash passwords and you'd have to crack each one individually. With this, you're encrypting those hashes.
Right.
And then if you know the threshold number, 10 in the example, of the shares, then you can get all the original hashes back. Now, this is if they were using, the full strength password hashing that we normally use now, it would be less of an issue. But because they're just using salted SHA 256 instead of SHA 256 crypt, it would be much easier to crack those passwords then. But they've worked around the problem of Facebook anyway. So instead of having to worry that somebody could just know 10 Facebook or 10 Gmail accounts, or even if you ramp that number up to 250 or something, that's still, it's not unfeasible to have that many passwords.
Whereas the chat room is pointing out.
Yahoo went and disabled a bunch of accounts because some other password database got leaked and somebody happened to just get 1,000 people's passwords that happen to be the same for their email as it was for this other website.
And if it's only 10 accounts, you could go create 10 accounts.
Yeah, there's also that. So the polypass hash has a system of thresholdless accounts. The idea here is these are accounts that have 0 shares, so they don't help decrypt it. And so in that type of an example, say like a Facebook or Gmail or something, only administrators or maybe power users in some other case would have shares of the password.
That makes sense.
So it would take 3 Google administrators or 10 Google administrators to enter their password to decrypt the database to start using it. But no number of hacked Gmail accounts would ever be able to read the database.
I like this. And you see...
and that's also especially important in things where you don't have a password. Like, say, if you're using OAuth. Now, if you're going to use this for a forum, because forums are one of the things that get dumped the most often with, and where this type of thing would be the most use.
Yeah.
Well, if you're accepting OAuth to let people authenticate with their Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, you don't actually have a password to hash.
Yeah. All right. True.
And so you can use those as with the thresholdless account, so that knowing that person's stuff doesn't actually help you decrypt the database. And they also have some provisions for things like biometrics, right? If you're going to have a fingerprint scan, that you don't have a password. And what about SSH keys? Right? You're not using a password to log in. They actually propose a solution for that where instead of using the password as what's stored in the database, which is then used to check if you decrypt the share, the idea is that you encrypt the share of the secret key with the SSH key, their public key.
Yeah.
So only the private key can decrypt it, and then they can decrypt it and use it to access the database. There's more detail in the paper. I'm not sure about that one. That one might actually require a change. But the biggest thing about this system is that the change would only have to be on the server, right? If you're, a user logging in with your username and password,
you wouldn't even know.
Website or a forum, you wouldn't know that in the back end they've upgraded to this system.
No reason to. This is what I love about it, is it's grafting a whole new level of security on top of the passwords database system that has been just getting. I mean, it's just been getting beaten.
It's basically just improving password hashing, right? Because now we have SSH 512 crypt and bcrypt.
Yeah.
And those are pretty good.
Yeah.
But this definitely seems like it offers some advantages if it was combined with, say, SHA 512 crypt and bcrypt instead of just a plain SHA 256 hash. But, that's just an implementation detail. And then the other thing is, currently in their example, they're just using their own kind of bespoke database for it. But it looks like you should be able to make a standard modular password hash. So, like we have $6 for SHA 512 crypt, and then you have the optional strength and so on. Well, they would just have to have the share index number and then the password, and there's this saved data and stuff. It seems like it could work.
That's really exciting. It's called polypass hash, and the URL is kind of crazy.
The one other drawback was until the password database, until you've reached the threshold and decrypted the database, you can't add new users.
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely
that only really happens after a reboot.
Yeah.
So one of the problems with implementing this, say, in a website forum, is that it kind of relies on having this persistence to store the decrypted database in memory, or the keys anyway, the keys for the database in memory.
Okay.
So you'd have to have something left running, or write the key down on the disk, but then it can be stolen just as easily as a password database. So then you're talking about keeping this thing
Would
running.
that be a problem in like a Facebook-sized user database?
Well, you wouldn't have to keep the whole database in memory,
just
the key. But for a PHP website forum, there is no persistence normally, right? PHP just starts when somebody requests a page, and then it ends when it delivers the page. And there's not necessarily persistence like that.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that obviously someone can get the key if they can read memory on the system. But if they can read memory on the system, they
got a bigger problem.
Plain text passwords as well. So it's,
Then they're in your box. If they're reading your memory, they're in your box, and you got other problems.
But the biggest one, it would protect you from SQL injection, disclosing your database.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I keep thinking about. Or if somebody got on the...
Even then, if you're looking at like a vBulletin or something, even storing the key in a file outside the web root or something, if the SQL injection only lets them get the SQL database, then maybe that's helpful. But it seems like you should be able to do some kind of persistence for that, maybe.
Interesting. And it actually seems like, they're kind of putting it out there.
Somebody mentioned cookies, but no, you don't ever give the encryption keys for the password database to a user.
No. But you could always join our live chat room and make suggestions like that. TechSNAP is live, and we have an embedded chat room. Just go, if you want to also use your own IRC client, go to irc.geekshed.net in it and pound Jupiter Broadcasting. That's the room. Easy.
Yep.
Polypass hash. That's a really cool find, Alan.
It is.
Did you find? Did they say what
really
source? What license the source is under?
I don't know that they did specifically.
Yeah, I'm looking on their GitHub page, and I don't feel like.
But it's.
Oh, here it is. License.
It's
MIT.
Okay. Yep. That's same idea as a BSD license. But again, that's just a reference implementation.
Right.
So it's anybody could write based on the paper, you could go and write your own implementation from scratch.
Yeah.
And do it slightly differently.
Well, that's cool, Alan. It's really, I would love to see something like that.
The better question is there an implementation of the sharing secret thing in C that's BSD licensed? So I know some people, and this might be an interesting thing to have this $7 in the FreeBSD password database.
All right. Well, why don't we take a brief moment here and thank Ting.com, another sponsor of the TechSNAP program. Ting is mobile that makes sense. My mobile service provider. I've got the Nexus 5. I'll be honest. I know the HTC One M8's out there and looking awesome with its 2 cameras. But gosh, the value around the Nexus 5 and what I think it represents for the future of the mobile industry really has me excited. And when you combine something like any of these great Android devices with the Ting service, It's so perfect. You know, I think one way you could kind of think about Ting is it's mobile done completely different. There's no BS, there's no contract, there's no early termination fee, and you only pay for what you use. Think of Ting more as a utility for your communications. And so instead of paying into large contracts that you don't get the full value out of, like, for example, I was paying about $125 a month before I switched to Ting for a fixed set of minutes, a fixed set of megabytes, and if I went over those megabytes, I would be immediately charged $15 for the next gigabyte. And then after I hit that gigabyte, I get charged another $15. And this is a problem where when I'm in a situation like I have been this last couple of weeks where I'm working out of the studio and our internet connection's going up and down as we're doing new wiring and things like that, it's really nice to know that, okay, well, this month, guess what? My data bill is going to be higher. But it's just whatever usage I need. I'm always getting the value out of my plan because it's all based on my minutes, my messages, and my megabytes. And then they add all that up at the end of the month. Whatever bucket I fall into, that's what I end up paying. And when you combine it with the Ting dashboard, so I can keep track of that kind of stuff really easily. And also, so I've got it loaded right here on my device. The Ting mobile device, the Ting mobile app makes it crazy easy to manage a lot of the settings for your Ting account, to set up alerts, to check just, on the status of where things are at with your bill and whatnot. So you can see right now my current bill is $15. That's $15 for 2 plans, or for 2 phones. Each phone is just a flat $6 a month, and then it's just the usage on top of that. When you think about that, that's an amazing value, especially if you need to do support, you need to have multiple phones, you're doing development. If you're a small business or a family, there's a lot of advantages to that. Or if you're just by yourself and you just want a phone that you just pay for when you use it, it's incredible. So get started by going to techsnap.ting.com. That'll take $25 off your first device. Or if you have a device, $25 of Ting credit will be applied to your account. And be sure to check out the Ting blog because guess what? They've just rolled out Amazon payments. So if you've got an Amazon payment balance, you can use that to pay your Ting bill, which is pretty cool. They have information over at ting.com/blog. But do me a favor. Start by going to techsnap.ting.com. They got a lot on the blog right now. The Ting people are firing on all cylinders this week. They just posted a new App of the Week video that is an awesome game. It's called Quiz Up. If you've not tried it out, go watch that video. It's so much fun. They just did a Google Hangout before we went live with their marketing team, and we're just fielding all kinds of questions. And they're very transparent. They're very forward. Ting is a very honest company, and if you ask them a question, they can answer it, and they combine it with excellent customer service. All of this is excellent. And then if you ever have any problems, if you ever get stuck, you can call Ting at 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And a real Canadian answers the phone. A real Canadian answers the phone. That's about as bad. That's better than an American answering the phone because Canadians are so nice. That's what I always say, right? Aren't you Canadians all nice?
Yep.
I was like, yeah, no, not really. But the ones,
yep.
Yeah, I know. But that was a no yep. I know.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, so anyways, techsnap.ting.com. Go check them out. See what I've been talking about. See why I think you should switch. And by the way, every Ting plan includes hotspot tethering, voicemail, picture messaging, text messaging. It's super nice. techsnap.ting.com. And a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Okay, and if I was a credit card thief, you know how I would do it? I would do it in like little small transactions, just itty-bitty ones here that people might not even notice. Maybe like $15, $10 here. What do you think? Think I could make millions?
And probably not millions, but you could definitely make some money.
I could probably at least be featured by Krebs, right?
You mean hunted down by Krebs?
All right, so what's going on with this story?
So over at Krebs on Security, he's got his investigation into BLS WebLearn, which is a company that he suspects running a scam. So the service called BLS WebLearn has been identified as being behind a scam where a bunch of people's credit cards would get small fees for less than $15.
There you go.
The scam centers around making small charges that appear on your credit card bill for small random amounts like $9.84 or $10.37. Because a flat $10 would look suspicious as well. And being the same amount on every card would make it easier for people to Google a specific amount to be like, what's this weird charge for $9.84 on my credit card?
Credit card companies might be more likely to notice too.
Yeah. So the line item also includes a toll-free phone number, like most items on your credit card bill do. And your bank encourages you to call that number and try to identify what the charge is. Like if you're like, I don't recognize this charge on my card. They're like, well, there's an 800 number there. Call them and see if that jogs your memory or if they can help you explain what the charge is. Because we've gotten a couple of those calls at Scale Engine. Because
what do you get when you call it?
On a company. Well, normally it's the customer calling. We're like, who are you? We're like, the one was like a church. We're like, we do the video streaming for you. And it's like, oh, okay. Or one time I think it was somebody's bank called and we're like, yeah.
No, I mean the number they provided. What do you get when you call it? The number the scammers provided.
They're actually, they have a support number, and they basically what happens there is they're like, oh, right, this is a mistake, sorry, and they refund the money.
Really? I'm going to call it. Should I call it? You think I should? I could call it.
The number changes, and I'm pretty sure they're shut down now. So
let's find out.
And it wouldn't do very much good if you'd have to give them like the last 4 digits of your credit card number so they could find the transaction and refund it, right?
Yeah, I suppose so, huh?
Yeah. They're not going to refund you if you didn't charge it. You can't get free money.
See. Oh, I'm calling. I'm going to call. Nope. Nah, they don't answer. Nobody there.
Yeah.
That'd have been fun. That'd have been a good call. Okay.
But the general idea is that they, talk you down and try to get you not to go talk to your bank about it. And so, for the people that call, they give the money back. But they make all their money off the people that don't bother to call because it was $9.84. And like, I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't $100, so I don't care. Right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's such a little amount, people probably feel it's not worth their time most of the time.
Yeah, or they're like, oh, I'll call tomorrow, and then they don't.
Yeah.
So, they make the money off the people that don't notice the small charges or don't dispute them. So unlike many scams, because they maintain that they're a legitimate business and actually had the 800 number that worked at one point and refunded the charge when you called and complained, they didn't rack up a large number of chargebacks, right? What a typical scammer would do is charge lots of money to a whole bunch of cards, take the money and run. But you get caught pretty quick with that. With this, they managed to spread the charges out so it wasn't all at once, so it doesn't trigger that kind of alarm. And then they didn't get a lot of chargebacks because when people complain, they just give them the money back.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't have this history of having all these chargebacks.
Yeah.
Which is also similar to the way the scams for those penny auction sites. Have you seen these where, you buy a pack of bids for like $100, not realizing you go to bed on get a Mac laptop for like $50.
I've seen ads for
do that. Yeah, but to do that, you have basically everybody who bids on it pays $50, and then the person who paid $51 gets the laptop. So the auction site actually just got like $8,000 for a $3,000 laptop. And so it's basically the idea is that everybody bids and only the winner gets it, but everybody pays. And with those, they make enough money that some of the people that complain, they could just give the money back and avoid having their credit card processing shut down. So that's what these guys did, is they would just give the money back to avoid their credit card processing getting shut down or red flagged. And so they could operate long enough to make a serious amount of money just off the people that didn't notice the charge or didn't notice it soon enough.
Right.
Krebs had investigated a similar case back in January or earlier. And that was one where the credit card processor was based in Malta. But he says, since then, the name of the online learning company and the credit card processor keep changing. And some of the names suggest a relation between a couple of the companies. Like one was called PLI Blue at one point, and the payment processor in the newest one was called Blue Snap.
Uh-huh. Blue Snap? Hey, wait a minute. Copyright infringement on TechSNAP.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things is the payment processor Blue Snap lists having offices in Massachusetts, California, Israel, and Malta, and London. And the network used in the previous scam, called Freedorax, also said it had offices in Massachusetts, Israel, London, and Malta.
Uh-huh.
It was like,
coincidence?
There seems to be some crossover there.
Yeah.
And he's got a bunch more detail there, and it's an interesting read if you ever want to know how some of that stuff works.
Man, I'll tell you what, these credit card companies are just really up against like a torrent of different types of attacks. And this one, I think this type of one is probably so much more predominant than we realize, and maybe even like not even at this level of scamminess, but like illegitimate quote unquote services that people kind of accidentally sign up for or somehow get attached to.
So there's the ones where people accidentally sign up for or whatever.
Yeah.
Like a lot of sites are like that. It's like, oh, have a free trial, but if you don't cancel in 3 days, we'll charge your card $50 a month.
My wife, like when CD stores were still a thing, was in buying an album and somehow accidentally signed up for Entertainment Weekly, and we started getting monthly bills of like $20 a month for this crappy magazine subscription that they had it because she used that same payment information at the store and the store provided. I don't know exactly what happened, but it's these kind of reoccurring scams that like we didn't notice until 6 months later when we're like, wait a minute, what we're getting billed?
There's always a big one online with, it's either free or like $1 for the trial.
Yeah.
And then if you don't cancel after 3 days, then they start charging you $50 a month.
So there's all of that going on, like the free credit report one and all that kind of stuff that happens. And then you have these guys that are doing it illegitimately. How do they get the credit card, though? How do they?
It depends. Some of them, they're just stealing them from various places, buying them stolen, whatever. Okay. And, if they buy them exclusively, then if no one else has that stolen card, then it's not going to get replaced because of one little $10 charge.
Yeah.
Right? And it means they can...
Well, and honestly, like, even doing the show...
And then later, after a couple of months, then they can resell those cards because they're still not leaked, right? And things like that. And they can...
Right, yeah. And honestly, like, if I saw some weird charge and I called a 1-800 number and they cleared it all up, like, I don't think I would think that's a scam.
Right, and you wouldn't be like, oh, how did they get my credit card if I didn't sign up for this?
Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, but it seems like that the fact that they're answering
a lot of average
calls,
people, as long as they got their money back, they wouldn't care.
The fact that they're answering calls and refunding money, to me, it's like that's the perfect double punch to the scam, because that, to me, I think a lot of people think, oh, it must be legitimate. They answered the phone. It must be legitimate.
And so I wonder if the banks need to start looking as a fraud metric on, are these guys refunding like 50% of all their charges all the time?
Right.
And if so, what's up with that?
Yeah, is that a warning sign we need to take notice of?
But at the same time, most fraud detection happens at the bank level. And so, you only have so many of these customers hit at each different little bank. And so there's never this critical mass, right? You don't see all the, you don't see the problem happening on a large scale at each of the individual card issuing banks.
And the dollar amounts aren't enough either.
Payment processor, right? And it's the payment processor, that's closer to the merchant, who's actually dealing with the merchant, is supposed to be kind of on the merchant's side, that would have to notice the hinky behavior and decide they don't want to be involved with it.
Yeah.
But, some of the payment processors there are a little more willing to do that. And as Nexus points out in the chat room, would that many people actually bother with the refund for $9.84?
I don't think so. And I know that sounds...
Yeah.
I don't
it might not be enough people to put it above what some legitimate business might have as its refund portion.
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of the perfect little crime that is really going to... Does chip and pin solve this at all?
Not online, because you don't enter a pin online either. Something like Verified by Visa stops stolen cards being used a bit. And, CVVs are supposed to stop this, right? If you have that little code verification value, then the idea is that never gets stored in a database, so it can't get stolen when a database gets stolen, and it can't be used. But a lot of places don't require it. Like I know Amazon is famous for not even using it because they'd rather deal with the percent of fraud than to make people be like, I don't know where that number is.
And
like, I don't know anybody that doesn't know where that number is. It's typing 3 numbers off the back of the card. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. I actually find it weird, like when I'm paying over the phone and they ask for that number, I'm like, why are you asking for that number? Like, that's weird, but...
Is it? I always think it's weird when they don't.
It should be.
Maybe it's because I was a merchant, right? So it's like I ask for it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not charging you if you don't have that.
Yeah. They should, right?
Yeah.
Well, any other thoughts on that one, Al?
But it's interesting to see. No, there's not really more. There's more in the article if you want to read more.
Okay. Well, guess where you can find that? Linked in the show notes. It's like magic. It's like everything we talked about ends up in the show notes somehow.
It's magic,
crazy. Yeah. Some sort of...
It's not like I spent 3 hours before the show writing the show notes.
I know. Yeah, that's that kind of magic. The one where it just happens because somebody did the work. All right, Al, well, I want to thank iXsystems, the third sponsor of the TechSNAP program, and both Al and I are customers of iXsystems, and I love all... iXsystems has their best line of products right now, and they're all powered by the Intel Xeon processors. Unless you're getting like that FreeNAS Mini, it's still an Intel processor, though. So iXsystems, who are they?
Class Atom is awesome.
Alan, tell the folks who iXsystems is.
I don't know. They're awesome people that are my friends.
Yeah, they...
That's the interesting thing. It's like, how many companies do you like hang out with
Right.
like half the staff a couple times a year.
That's the BSD booth you're going to be at. The iXsystems is going to be at that booth.
Yeah, they always send a couple of people, but between that and like the actual BSD conferences with like half the companies there, it's like I know like all of the people on like a first name basis there. And
well,
they know who I am. And,
as it turns out, iXsystems has a page dedicated to answering that question in a very real, actual way. iXsystems is literally made up of people writing the code, people who are experts in storage systems, people who are expert in hardware deployment, people who are experts in customer service, and they've brought I can't even tell you like the people that work at iXsystems are literally the people that are building some of the things a lot of us deploy in our environments. I can't tell you the kind of benefit that brings to a company. You can't understate it. It is absolutely key to the iXsystems recipe. And as a customer, you get to take advantage of that massive well of knowledge, the great customer service, the white glove customer experience, the burn-in testing that they do. They have a whole range of folks who are experts on these products, and it shows. You can look at their client list and you can see why folks like the Mozilla Foundation, TiVo, NASA, WB, Sony, the U.S. Army, Hitachi, Adobe, Shutterfly, all these people use iXsystems because iXsystems is honestly one of the best providers out there for hardware solutions for open source systems. Right,
and that's the other thing is that they're not just selling off-the-shelf servers. They will custom build things. Like we saw the FreeBSD Foundation we need a machine with as many CPUs as you can fit in it.
Yeah.
It's like we need like 80 cores to make sure, the idea there is develop FreeBSD so it works better on an 80-core machine so that in a couple of years when everybody has 80 cores, it'll be great.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, yeah, we can build you a machine with 80 cores and a terabyte of RAM.
Yep.
And like 6 500 gig SSDs, no problem.
Well, and you're for Scale Engine, you're looking at it on the high end enterprise gear side. I'm looking at iXsystems, because my interaction with them has been more on the consumer side with the FreeNAS Mini, and now
I needed a router for my house, and I built a tiny little E3 system, short depth. It's quiet. It sits in my basement.
That's just the thing is I feel like even on the consumer end of the spectrum, like you still get to benefit from all of the super high-end expertise that they have in-house. Even when you're getting yourself a NAS or a router box for your house, like you still are taking advantage of that all the way up to massive data center deployments of machines that are just incredible at what they're doing. And the thing like Alan and I always love to mention too is these guys have a great burn-in process. So if you have to get that shipped to a data center you're not physically at, you don't have to worry about the drive dying in the first 24 hours once the machine boots up.
But also they do configuration, right? You get a configuration worksheet and you can tell them I need these BIOS settings set and I want it partitioned this way, and they'll do all that for you and ship it directly to where you want it to go.
It's pretty awesome. And if you go.
People ask about it quite a bit. They ship internationally. So no matter where you are, they will ship you your hardware.
Here's what I'd like you guys to do. Please go over to iXsystems.com/TechSNAP. That lets them know you appreciate them supporting the show. And lets you check out a little bit about them. They also have a white paper you can download, The Ultimate Guide to Buying a New Server for Open Source, 11 key traits you must absolutely demand from your provider. They're not going to spam you.
Which is great information for you, but at the same time, it's the ammunition you need to convince your boss to let you buy from iXsystems instead of your regular hardware vendor.
This is
great. Here's a bunch of things that iX can do that other people can't.
Well, and
why you should be buying from them.
And it's totally legit, too. It's really awesome. Go check them out. They have servers built at meticulous quality, exactly what you need. They will work with you to make sure they're selling you the right solution. That white glove post-purchase support is still there. So after you're all done, they're still going to take care of you. So go over to iXsystems.com/TechSNAP and go deploy your next mission-critical application on an iX server. I don't think you'll regret it at all. I think there's very few things that I could say so unequivocally is if you're going to be very happy with your infrastructure if you deploy it on top of iXsystems gear. So iXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Scale Engine does it. Scale Engine does it. This show will reside on an iXsystems box when we're all done. How about that? How about that? Alan, this is I have a quick mini plug. It's only going to appeal to people who are watching this live, or be applicable to people that are downloading this right after the show is out on Thursday. But at 7 p.m. on jblive.tv, 7 p.m. Pacific, we're going to have a restream of Linus Torvalds' talk at the Portland Linux Users Group. Mm-hmm. So if you are watching live right now, or if you're watching this within an hour or two after it came out, it's going to be really close, but go over to jblive.tv and you can catch that. And also on their website, which I don't remember off the top of my head, but if you search for
pdxlinux.org.
There you go. /live is where they're going to have it. You can watch it there, too. Okay, Alan, well, the news is all done, so you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. for sending your emails to TechSNAP@jupiterbroadcasting.com or pop in that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our brand new subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, just like our first feedback did this week. And it was from Trout Tickler, which is a pretty good name. Trout Tickler. And Trout Tickler kicked off the thread for who should play Alan Jude. Now, he recommended... I don't even know the actor's name. I'm sorry. I massively failed. We got a few in here. Here's the one I like. There's one that stood out. Dave Style wrote in Robot Devil, and he included a picture. Are you familiar with the Robot Devil from...
yes.
Yeah.
Futurama.
That's pretty good from Futurama. That's a pretty good one, Alan. That'd be good for you. Let's see. We got... how about the guy from Breaking Bad? The main guy from Breaking Bad. Say my name, and then that's right. It's Alan Jude. Yeah.
Well, no, you're kind of missing the joke there. It's not actually about the guy, but anyway.
Oh, well, tell me that. I don't know. I don't watch the show.
No, I don't either.
Oh.
It's just, if you read
Say
what
my
the
name
text says, and then click the link, and so they're saying I was saying
Say my
thinking
name. Yeah.
that you, and then when you would answer, and then I was like, right.
I got you. That's pretty funny. So the admin, the dealer, and the teacher would be the tagline. So there you go. If you guys want to jump in, that we'll have that thread linked in the show notes. Okay, our first email comes in from Smash. He says, hello, gents. I thought I would share something I discovered at my dentist office. Yes, the entire office is running on Windows XP. 5.5 days before XP end of life. It was my duty to alert the personnel and the owner of the company. The company's response was from a 70-year-old man saying, yes, we need new computers and we're looking into it. I hate that my personal info is locked in on these business systems run by XP, which is that when he said that point, I was like, oh, yeah, that is awful. Mm-hmm. He thinks maybe a little public shaming might help. He said he'll send a picture along, and he did. So here is the picture of this medical record system, and it looks like, here, let me zoom out a little bit. It looks like maybe an old 16-bit Windows application, just the worst. I saw so many of these.
No, it's Windows XP. It's not 16-bit.
No, I know, but it looks like
I think that looks like the scheduling software.
Yeah,
I recognize that from my dentist office.
With a fake little book thing.
Each day, and then they have 15-minute segments, right? And then they just drag it, right? That slot's marked off for this customer or whatever.
Practice Works version 7. That's what he's got
Sounds
there.
about right.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, it helps that these systems are usually not connected to the internet, but often a dentist will be like, oh, I want to web browse on this too and connect it to the internet. And that's where the real problem gets in. If these machines are isolated and, not touching the internet, that's not as bad.
Yeah.
But it definitely...
but they could have machines on the network that are connected to the internet that, could connect to
and they don't have a separate VLAN, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate the idea of personal records like that stored on an XP machine. Avid writes.
And that was when XP was still considered fairly secure.
Yeah.
Let alone nowadays.
Yeah. Avid writes in. He says, hey, guys. Avid, you're...
Aviad.
Yes.
Yeah. He's written in a couple of times.
I know.
He works at a research company.
He says he's got another question. Seeing that almost no one compiles their software from source anymore, it got me wondering, how can I make sure that the essentially binary blob I downloaded are actually coming from the official OS's repo? I currently use Ubuntu, and I would like to know if there's any way to compare the checksum hash whatever of the on the system package to something that on the Ubuntu website. I don't mind doing it manually once because I understand that whatever automatic way I will find... anyways, he goes on. Also, I understand that it would be better if I could examine the file system when it was not being used by the running OS, as rootkits could easily mask themselves, etc. He says, I also encourage Alan to tell us all about the wonderful ways you could do this on BSD, but the more pressing concern for me right now is the Linux way, Ubuntu specifically. Thanks for the great show. All the best with the new studio. Aviad. He always tries to help, but I still manage to screw it up.
Yeah. On BSD, the ports tree has always had the hashing thing. So the idea was that you get the ports tree securely directly from FreeBSD with something like PortSnap. And in that includes the SHA-256 hash of every downloaded file that you might get. And then, so you download it and compare the hash and don't use it if it doesn't match. So with the package system, the new one, the binary one, PAG, which is kind of like apt-get on Ubuntu, it also compares the hashes. And now in version 1.2 and higher, the packages are signed cryptographically as well. So not only do you know that the hash is correct, so the file didn't get modified in transit or corrupted and whatever, it's signed with a key that is distributed as part of the FreeBSD operating system. So you know this package came from FreeBSD and has not been modified since. And you can also, if you're using Poudriere to create your own package system, like I do for at Scale Engine for our servers, because we custom compile some stuff, I have a key that I distribute via Puppet to all of our servers, and they use that to verify that the packages they're getting from me are actually from me and not from someone else.
Very cool.
Separate from that, the package system in FreeBSD can also checksum each file when it's installed. So when it installs the file, it knows what the checksum for each file should be, and it keeps that in the package database. So after time, you can run the package check something command, and it will actually check to see if any of the files have been modified. And it will actually alert you, hey, this file's been modified. It actually was originally designed for a different reason, or has an additional benefit anyway, of it installs example config files. If you modify that example and make it not the example anymore, it won't uninstall it. So it deletes all the files if they haven't been modified. But if you modify a file, it doesn't delete it. And then when you install the new one over top, it knows, hey, don't overwrite my config file that's working with an example one, because that would be bad. So yeah, in FreeBSD, you get the checksum of the package when you download it. They're also cryptographically signed. And then you also keep track of the hashes of all the files when they're installed. So it kind of gives you like that IDS/tripwire type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
I kind of assumed apt already did that. Some of that anyway.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. He's got to find a program that works with apt, and I haven't used it.
Well, it's not built into, like, I know Yum, the packages you get are GPG signed from
it might
CentOS.
be. The tool I've always heard that you're supposed to use, and the one that Ubuntu recommends, is called debsums, and you can do debsums-c, and it'll look at all changed files and compare them to the version in the repo and do a checksum. So I'll link to the Ubuntu article on how to do that. I don't know. Maybe there is something built into app, but the one I've always read to use is debsums, DEBSUMS.
Yeah. So for Red Hat based ones that use Yum, they cryptographically sign the packages, and that solves the problem. Basically, if you get the key from the right place and trust that key, then anything signed by that key is legitimate.
Well,
now,
of course,
if you're adding third party Yum repositories, then it gets different.
Right.
If you're using, say, iOS community, they publish their key, and you can verify that the package actually came from them and not someone else.
Yeah, I guess maybe his question sort of, maybe he doesn't understand that there is a key that's checked when you install the package to make sure that it's coming from the right location. So happens at the time of installation.
Does that happen in apt? I don't know.
Yeah. It didn't for a while, but as of 2 years ago or something, they changed that. I can't remember when they introduced it. So there's that happening at the time of installation, and then debsums is sort of like I've had a system installed for a while. After. Yeah, exactly.
So it compares what's on the system to what's
in the repo.
Oh, hi for joining the chat room, Aviad.
Oh, good. There he is.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link to the Ubuntu page on debsums in the show notes too.
Okay.
So you can check that out.
So in FreeBSD it's that, and there's package check to check the contents that are on your system after. Although, if you have a rootkit, then, it could return the wrong sum and you wouldn't notice. So then you would have to be able to, mount the system off, say, a live CD and check it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So our next question, when I read this morning, I was still really tired, so I didn't get it at the time, but I'm hoping I'll get it this time. It comes in from Stefan. He says, hey guys, I love TechSNAP and really all the JB shows. I listen to all the shows within the day after they can be downloaded. His workplace restricts streaming, though. I wonder if they'd allow him to do jblive.am. Super low bandwidth. I have a quick question for Alan. I recently bought 2 domain names with the GoDaddy code. Both of these point to DigitalOcean droplets, whoop whoop, that's currently just writing a plain text file to an HTTP stream. Let's call the domains mydomain1.com and mydomain2.com. I'm wondering how downloading things like images, JavaScript files, and CSS files, etc. work in this setup. So if I choose to go to mydomain1.com, but in the HTML, I say maybe pull the images from images, scripts, etc. from mydomain1.com, and the other half of the images and whatnot from mydomain2.com. Will that optimize my site similar as if I was using a CDN? How does this change if my domain 2 is just a forwarder to mydomain2.com? That's where he's losing me there.
I think the second one's supposed to be my domain 1.
Yeah, okay. He says,
couple
so he's
things.
trying to do basically like a cheap CDN, isn't he?
Yeah. First thing is that's not a CDN. That's just parallelized downloading, which is helpful, maybe. But the main thing a CDN does is that the server isn't where you're paying for your droplet. It's everywhere.
It's closer to
With
the
Scale
edge.
Engine, it's in 30 some odd different data centers in 11 different countries, and you're getting the one close to you, which is better.
Right.
And the other thing is to do what he's talking about, we're just having, the HTML comes down here and the JavaScript comes from over here and the images come from over here, because generally browsers will only connect to the same website a couple of times. It used to only be 2 or 3, now it maybe 4 or 5. But, if you're going to have a page that has 50 images on it, like a gallery or something, loading those from a bunch of different subdomains will mean that more of them will happen at once and it'll take better advantage of your broadband. You can do that with just subdomains. You can have, image1.mydomain.com and image2.mydomain.com and get the same benefit without having to buy a second domain. That's what we actually do. If you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, you'll see it actually loads from jb12345.cdn.scaleengine.net.
That's to trick the browser to just pull it from multiple locations?
Yeah, because when you load the front page of JB, you see there's 12 thumbnails of the show, right? Mm-hmm. But also there's 15 JavaScript files and 30 CSS files.
Mm-hmm.
So
and don't forget that JavaScript that starts up everybody's webcams and takes pictures.
Yeah. All that. And so we make that come from multiple, so that, normally if it would be I don't want to beat up on jupiterbroadcasting.com, so I'm only going to connect to it 3 times. Well, it thinks JB1, JB2, JB3, JB4 are each separate. So 4 times 4 means you're doing 16 images at once instead of 4.
So it's kind of like your way of saying, no, trust me, I can handle it. Let me just trick the browser into making multiple connections.
So he can do that with his thing. Although when you make it a forwarder, that doesn't quite work. See, with a forwarder, what happens is the DNS is going to point mydomain2.com to your domain host, like GoDaddy or whatever, and on their IP address, when they get the traffic, they do an HTTP redirect. And so that won't load the images. Or if it does redirect to the image, it'll actually make it slower because you're going to some other server and then coming back to your server.
Right.
Don't do that if it's a forwarder. You don't want to point them both at the same IP address, like he says in the subject of the email. Mm-hmm. I thought this question was completely different when I read the subject.
Yeah, I know. So I was really tired this morning. I'm like, okay, so I think he's asking about a CDN, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's not quite a CDN, but you can use 2 separate domains to speed up your website. Yeah. But they don't have to be separate domains. You can use 2 subdomains of your first domain.
There you go. Alan, you tossed in a link here about the great ECC debate and ZFS. Is this something that's we've maybe got a definitive answer on? Is that possible? Is that possible?
No, as far as a definitive answer, I asked the guy who invented ZFS in Tokyo the other day, and he's like, you don't have to have ECC. He doesn't know why people keep saying that.
Is it like belts and suspenders?
No, it's just... There's, if you're using non-ECC RAM, then there's a higher risk that the RAM will not read back the same thing you wrote to it, right? And so, obviously, using ECC RAM is better, but it costs a little bit more money.
Yeah.
But as far as that goes, upgrading a system to have ECC RAM is the cheapest way to get more uptime and reliability out of the system, right? You're not going to switch to non-ECC RAM to spend more money on some other component that'll make the system more reliable.
That's a good point.
So, for the money, it's worth getting ECC RAM, and that's why the new FreeNAS Mini has ECC RAM, because the price difference isn't all that much, and it made the biggest difference. It was the biggest bang for your buck to get more reliability out of a system. But you don't have to have it. There's some people saying you should never ever even look at ZFS if you don't have ECC RAM.
Oh, wow.
And that's not true, right? But, it's a risk and you have to choose to take it. But, I've never owned a desktop that had ECC RAM, right? And I've never had file system corruption caused by RAM.
Right.
That's just anecdotal, but, Yeah. And Google's done studies that the guy references in his blog post here about, eCCC RAM worth it? And they found that in a lot of cases, the server will go and never have a RAM error, but then sometimes there's one particular piece of RAM that'll have like 4,000 errors a day.
Yeah. Like
Or,
some were as high as 8%
solar
per
flare.
day.
Yeah, and some of them were, during a solar flare, it could make the difference between the machine staying up and the kernel panicking or writing corrupted data to your disk or something.
Wow.
And, with the price difference is not that big, maybe it's worth it. But,
I've wondered.
If you're using spare hardware at home or something, you shouldn't miss out on all the benefits of ZFS just because you don't have ECC RAM in the hardware you're using.
So don't let the guys that are saying you have to have ECC scare you off.
Yes, if you're building the system new, you probably want ECC, but don't let not having ECC stop you from using ZFS, if that makes sense.
There you go. I wonder too, some people have speculated Apple includes the error correcting RAM in their Mac Pros, and some people speculate that one of the reasons they do that is because the HFS file system is such crap that maybe one of the ways you reduce file system corruptions on the Mac Pro is by having error correcting RAM.
In general, it just reduces kernel panics and any odd behavior, right? It just makes... Also, partly it's because the processors they use only support ECC RAM.
Oh, that's right. They use the Xeons. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there's that.
We have a make good...
And also, it can also be... depending on the system...
Yeah.
Like most motherboards, like if you have a mid-range server motherboard that'll take ECC or non-ECC, it'll be something like you can have up to 32 gigs of non-ECC, or in the same motherboard, you can fit 768 gigs of ECC.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So again, it can come down to ECC RAM is, the more RAM you have, the more likely you are to be using ECC.
There's a problem that Metal Geek submitted to the subreddit about a month ago, and it got flagged as spam, so nobody saw it. And he's got a question about recovering a LUX encrypted partition, which I don't really have much experience with, but he managed to foobar a LUX encrypted partition on a 2 terabyte external disk. And he's wondering if some guys have some ideas. He's got a couple suggestions in here. So,
well, I suppose it depends what happened. If he forgot the password, he's screwed, and that's why you should be more careful using disk encryption.
He thinks what the data is okay. He's got the key for it, but the problem is he screwed up the LUX header on the drive when he was playing around with test disk. So the header is screwed up, but the data header and the data itself still should be okay, he thinks.
I don't know enough about LUX to know what's going on.
So what I wanted to do is, since he put it in the subreddit to get the overall audience, but since it got flagged as spam, nobody got a chance to see it, and he's had this problem for over a month. So I was hoping maybe somebody out in the audience has some experience with this. I will link this particular thread in the show notes. I don't know if you'll even be able to see it in the subreddit since it was a month ago. I just unspammed it this morning. But if you know about LUX and know how to maybe solve a problem like this, or maybe have some troubleshooting ideas even, anything to help him out, I have it linked in the feedback section of the show notes. If you could go in there and drop him a comment, I think he'd really appreciate it. Because he sent us an email this week, and he submitted this a month ago, so it's still a problem he's having. And
right. I don't know.
I feel bad for
him. One of the downsides of encryption is that
yes.
The decision you have to make when you start encrypting your disk is: would you rather lose it than let someone else have it?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
And if the answer is no, you wouldn't rather lose it, then maybe you shouldn't be using disk encryption.
It's a big reason why I don't encrypt a lot of my laptops and stuff. Because it's like, Yeah,
what if I forget the password, or what if something goes sideways? It's easier to recover a disk if it's not encrypted.
Right, and I like the ability to boot up from a live environment and go poke around in there if something's messed up, and But maybe
depending on the disk encryption you use, you can mount encrypted partitions.
I'm BitLocker on everything, man. Even on Linux, I run NTFS on my Linux boxes. I BitLocker that. Of course, I have to only.
Chris, it's a little late for April Fool's jokes.
You're right. All right, Alan. Well, that's all the feedback for this week. If you'd like to send us a question, we'd love to get them. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. Click the contact link and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, or email techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or even better, start a thread in that brand new subreddit we just launched today, links.techsnap.tv, and ask your question, and we'll feature it in an upcoming episode of TechSNAP. We love getting those in, and anything networking related, security related, sysadmin related, all that kind of stuff. It's all open game. Send them in to us. We enjoy it. But Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the roundup for stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still would like to talk about them and give you some links to follow up on and read on your own after the show. Some of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And this first one, I watched this happen over the weekend on Twitter, and then I saw Dropbox's response, and I thought, this is a TechSNAP Roundup story. So, I don't know if you caught this, Alan, but it was tweeted out over the weekend that Dropbox started pulling down links to certain Dropbox folders that contained stuff that has been flagged by a copyright holder, like on the grounds of DMCA violations. Like the movie industry contacted Dropbox and said, we want this file pulled out of this person's Dropbox. And everybody responded like, how does Dropbox know what files are in there? And a DMC takedown, how is this possible?
We kind of talked about that like 2 years ago.
I know, right? Yeah.
Specifically, the way Dropbox does their deduplication and encryption is they deduplicate everything at the very end, and then every file that Dropbox is encrypted with the one Dropbox key.
Yeah.
So
now,
when
this time,
the advantage to that is when you upload a file and then I go to upload the same file, I don't have to upload it because Dropbox knows that you've already uploaded that file or a file with the same hash.
Yeah, and they have access to it.
And that means that they just mark me as a second reference to that copy. And so if you delete it, it doesn't delete it while I'm still using it. But the advantage to that is people don't upload the same files a bunch of times. They don't have to store the same file multiple times, etc. But that also means that if somebody flags one person's copy of that as a pirated movie, then they can take down everybody's copy of it.
Yeah, and they're actual DMCA takedown notices too. So it's not content ID for Dropbox, but what they're doing is the movie industry is providing them with file matches. What Dropbox is they are then doing is hashing those files. So like if it's a rip of Frozen, a Blu-ray rip of Frozen, an MKV file, they hash what that looks like. And then they search everyone's Dropbox for a matching hash. Now, Dropbox has said this system prevents us from actually knowing what's in your Dropbox because we're just looking for the hash. But if they know what generates that hash, then they know what the file is. Right? Because they know this is Frozen because it matches this hash, then they know what the files are. That's a disingenuous answer on Dropbox's part.
Right. And it's... Yeah, they're trying to describe it in a way that doesn't make them look as bad as that. Yes, they know every file that everybody has.
Yeah, so this to me is so disappointing, so expected though.
Well, Dropbox wouldn't work the way it does if it didn't do this, though.
Yeah, I just wish they weren't taking. So essentially, the way it seems like the system works is. The RIAA and the MPAA come to them with a whole series of files they see that are being shared on the web. They get Dropbox to hash all of it.
The movie companies only find out about this when somebody links to their Dropbox with a pirated movie.
Right. And then they'll pull down the link. And I don't even know if they're necessarily removing the files from the Dropbox or not.
I think they're taking it out of everybody's Dropbox because nobody's supposed to have a copy of that. It'd be really funny if it happened that somebody did a DMCA request for something, and they actually had a legit copy they were using in the Dropbox, and they got taken away because of that.
The problem I have with this is I pay for Dropbox. Like, I pay like $100 or something. I have like a big ass Dropbox account because I have a ton of stuff in there for production work, like big movie files in there. So I have a really big Dropbox that I spend a lot of money for. And if they ever pulled something out of my Dropbox, I would be really upset about that. So there you go.
If you have anything that somebody else owns in your Dropbox, then that could happen.
Yeah. So there's a warning to you. Fair warning. Pretty crazy. All right, Alan, next story in the roundup.
I just had a related note of that. Colin Percival, who runs TarSnap, the online backup service, did a post about this back in January of 2012. Specifically, somebody posted an image or something, and it got taken down, and they pulled it off everybody who had a copy and stuff. And they were talking about the service promises not to do this ever again. And it's like, well, with TarSnap, because the file's encrypted before it leaves your computer,
right?
I can't possibly know what the file is to take it away.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. Now, the disadvantage to that is that you have to upload the file even if someone else has already uploaded it, because your encrypted version will be different than their encrypted version. Yeah. Now, if you encrypt the same file a second time, then it'll be deduped. but you don't get the save. But it's not like Dropbox is passing the space savings on. It's not like they're charging you less money to store a file if somebody else already uploaded it and you didn't have to upload.
Right.
Now, it is speeding up your upload to Dropbox, so that's something.
I think it's more about saving the money on S3 storage, because I think that's what they use. And so, part of the problem is that their cost model would be too expensive if they had to store original version of every file. Yeah. On our next story, is it promising real gigabit wireless speeds? What's this about?
This is it's called MU-MIMO. The idea is that currently most wireless technology or wireless MIMO or whatever is based on time slicing. So the idea is you have this router, and because you're using a radio, means only one person can talk at once, right? Otherwise, the signals get mixed together and you can't tell whose is whose. So what that means is if you have 10 devices on the wireless network, you take the speed of the wireless network and divide that into 10 chunks and go. Huh. Now, it can be a little better than that where, if someone's not using it, then you can give more time to a different device and stuff. But it means the more devices there are, the less speed you get.
Right.
Right? If you've ever tried to use Wi-Fi at an airport or something, you'll realize that.
Yeah.
So the idea with MU-MIMO or multi-user MIMO instead of the original, which is single user, the idea is that specifically designed for a situation like an airport, you break, instead of having one block of time dividing it up between all the devices, you have, say, 3 blocks of time, and you're dividing it up between all the devices. So you're dropping the devices into groups. So it's like all these people share this block of time, all these people share this block of time, and all these people share this block of time. So based on the simple little diagram they do, if you had, a 300 megabit access point or whatever, and you have 3 people trying to use it, each user will get 117 megabits. But if you have multi-user MIMO, then 3 groups of clients trying to use it, and each one would get 300 megabits. This came out because Qualcomm has released their first device that actually supports this.
Oh, okay. So this is actually happening. It's happening.
Yeah, and according to Qualcomm, the home of the future could have as many as 20 devices on a single network, and so they needed to be able to not try to slice 1 second up by 20 for each device.
I think that's maybe even low, because I was looking at a security alarm system that communicates with all of the sensors over Wi-Fi, and then you've got TVs that come with Wi-Fi built in. Roku comes with Wi-Fi built in.
If you're looking at the Internet of Things, you're going to have a lot of devices.
You got smartphones, tablets, Wi-Fi built in. A lot of computers have Wi-Fi built in. It's gaming consoles. It's ridiculous. Everything has Wi-Fi built in.
Yep.
Watches. Literally watches most watches are going to start having Wi-Fi built in on the smart watches. All right.
But by the look of this, it only supports up to 3 groups, which seems like that's only going to help a little bit. So that's enough to help everybody at home, but it's like if you're in a more enterprise situation where you're going to have 100 laptops trying to use Wi-Fi or something, breaking them into 3 groups helps, but wouldn't it be better if you could do 10 groups?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to say. Interesting thing is there was also another story I don't have the link for recently about what was it about? I completely lost my train of thought.
About wireless?
The FCC opening up a bit more spectrum to allow more channels for wireless so that you could find a spectrum that wasn't as busy, or in a MIMO type situation have more channels.
We're sitting, like I mentioned all the time, we're sitting up at the studio, and I've owned that property for 7-8 years, and when I first bought that property, I was the only Wi-Fi access point in the whole area that I could detect. Now there's dozens, and they're all overlapping. It's a mess. It's a train wreck, Alan. I want to talk about something that's not a mess. WhatsApp just got a ton of money from Facebook, $19 billion. And one of the cool things about WhatsApp is they have really figured out scaling. And this article over at highscalability.com goes into it a little bit. What has hundreds of nodes, thousands of cores, hundreds of terabytes of RAM, hundreds of terabytes of RAM, and hopes to serve billions of smartphones that will soon be really all around the world? Well, that, of course, is the free BSD-based infrastructure at WhatsApp. 8,000 cores total, which is kind of insane.
Well, that was at one time. I think the subject mentions 11,000 cores, which I think what they're up to now. But
they handle, check this out, Alan. Peak concurrent connections, 147 million.
Yep.
230,000 logins a second. 342,000 peak messages a second. 712,000 out.
Apparently, during Christmas Eve, they pushed 146 gigabits per second of bandwidth.
360 million videos were downloaded on Christmas Eve. Wow. And so they're running on top of Erlang. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Erlang. It's a functional programming language, so it's kind of a different style of programming language than something like C or Java or anything like that.
And FreeBSD 9.2 is the BSD version. Over 550 servers plus standby gear, 150 chat servers, 250 MMS multimedia servers. Database nodes have 512 gigs of RAM each. Standard compute node has 64 gigs of RAM. SSDs primarily for reliability, except for when storing videos because more storage is required. And all machines have dual link gigabit Ethernet, and both of those have 2 ports on them.
Yep.
Pretty crazy. They really love Erlang. That's awesome. Great SMP scalability, they note it has.
Yes, and that's also why they use FreeBSD for the scalability.
Run at 1 million connections per second instead of the 2 million connections per second server they did 2 years ago, generally because the servers are a lot busier. Users are more active than they were 2 years ago, they noted too, so the problem just keeps getting, the need to scale just keeps growing. It's a really great article about the technology behind WhatsApp that we have linked in the roundup if you guys want to go check that.
Yeah, if you go back to their blog, they have a couple where they're talking about their FreeBSD servers and how they were handling, at peak, over 2 million concurrent TCP connections on FreeBSD, and it's just something that wasn't possible on Linux at the time.
Wow. And there's a YouTube video linked in there too.
Yep.
Okay, Alan, our next...
I wonder, it'd be interesting to see if they had played recently with FreeBSD 10, and it's got some more scalability, especially in the network stack.
So how about this for some spam? Somebody sends out some spam, accidentally reveals their database password when you click through.
Kind of, yeah. So, you get the spam, and if you click through, then apparently they got so many click-throughs for this dating site spam that it caused an error in their app spit out. For some reason, rather than just giving out, the error message or whatever, it actually spat out the chunk of source code that generated the error. And that chunk of source code has the database password and IP address and everything.
Oops.
For their, it's like an Amazon EC2, I think. And it's just like,
yep.
I'm not sure which framework it is, but it drops a stack trace saying that, var app current track.php, blah, blah, blah. And it spits out the username.
And the password.
Genuineshire, or Genushire.
Yeah.
And the password, which is like semicolon, KV, et cetera.
A pretty good password. But
decent one, but I love how their database is called Genushire _real_new.
This is the real new one, not the fake new one. Yeah.
Yeah, not the testing new one. Is it?
Right. Well, if it was...
Oh, apparently it's Genius Hires, but maybe it isn't even a dating site.
Oh, okay. This story is blowing up on our subreddit and all over the web today. It's the top of Tech Meme, too. The EU passes a net neutrality law. And here's some of the highlights that I gathered by reading through it. The law calls for fair treatment of end-to-end users and businesses alike by treating all internet traffic equally, regardless of the content or the provider. That would mean that internet providers cannot throttle users streaming Netflix content because of the high bandwidth costs, or mobile carriers blocking access to Skype because it hurts their voice or calling revenue. The legislation, which does not differentiate between cellular and landline networks, means both fixed line and on-the-go mobile users will benefit from the law. Part of the wording of the bill, though, has provisions for specialized services, which can be exempted from these rules.
The old one did, which they removed in the newest version of the law, I thought.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm reading this from the...
There used to be an exemption like that, and I think they got rid of it in the newest version.
So essentially it's like...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But essentially what they're saying is sort of like, if you run a special line, or you can have something that's like an internal network that's not part of the greater internet, the rules don't apply to that. Something that was recently discussed was Apple getting a deal with Comcast where Comcast would peel off some of the spectrum, or whatever you want to call it, on the coaxial line. It might still be an IP network, but it's not part of the overall internet, and so therefore net neutrality rules
Yeah,
would
which
apply
seems
to
like
this.
a way of just getting around network neutrality, which shouldn't be allowed.
So so what I don't understand is how does this? I guess this doesn't really impact the whole just pornography, protecting the children filtering that they have.
Well, no, because that's not
UK
EU-wide. That's specific to the UK.
So this
The EU is-
doesn't change any of that because that's like a service that people are electing to get, or I don't.
Right. That's it's unrelated to network. One of the other interesting things here is that it will end all roaming fees for European cell phone service.
Oh. Wow. Is this just because they have some competition in the market, and so, like,
Well,
why don't we?
Not just that. Part of it is just making sure they have that, and part of it is just that Europe is more liberal and less,
you go.
free market toting.
All right, Alan. Well, so we were talking about credit card transactions earlier. Well, one of the guys from Sophos has talked about secure credit card transactions and in a video over at Slashdot.
Slashdot, yep.
Yeah.
He did a video, and I thought that might be of interest to people.
Yeah. Yeah. He provides advice and insight into the latest threats for security and IT professionals with the goal of providing clear guidance on complex topics. Well, there you go. Sounds like the guy you'd want to talk to. And we'll have that linked in the show notes over on Slashdot. Okay. This one was sent in via email, and I got to look into this because I was a Boxy TV user. Boxy.tv has exposed password data and messages for 158,000 users. Their forum was hacked. So if you had a Boxy TV forum account, check your password. If you used the password at that forum that you used anywhere else, go change it.
Yeah, and stop doing that, by the way.
Yeah, LastPass is using this as an opportunity to get the word out about this as a problem, saying, "Hey, stop it." Okay, on our next roundup item is a video. Do you want me to play this video?
It's rather long, but it's really funny. If you want to I don't know if you want to play.
Should I play
the first 30 seconds or something?
Okay, I can. I'll play a little bit of it. Here we go. I'll start it off. Hopefully YouTube doesn't pull us for this.
Yeah, I started when I was 14. That's when I
What are you playing? That's not the video.
It's a Dave Chappelle video. I don't know.
That's not the video I linked.
YouTube is crazy. Although I was like, all right, we're going to watch a little Dave Chappelle. I mean, I could. I don't mind. I bet what happened is I opened it up in a tab and then like YouTube like loaded a video. I don't know.
I think it played it and then skipped it or something. Because
it's here. I found it. I think. Let's see. Yeah. Here we go.
Strategic initiative to increase market penetration, maximize brand loyalty, and enhance intangible assets. In pursuit of these objectives, we've started a new project for which we require 7 red lines. I understand your company can help us in this matter.
Of course. Walter here will be the project manager. Walter, we can do this, can't we?
Yes, of course. Anderson here is our expert in all matters related to the drawing of red lines. We've brought him along today to share his professional opinion.
Nice to meet you. Well, you all know me. This is Justine, our company's design specialist. Hello. We need you to draw 7 red lines, all of them strictly perpendicular, some with green ink and some with transparent. Can you do that?
No, I'm afraid...
Let's not rush into any hasty answers, Anderson. The task has been set and needs to be carried out.
This is great, Alan.
How do you make 7 lines that are all perpendicular to each other?
Yeah, hold on.
It's impossible.
Hold on. The expert, he can't speak too soon. I don't know where the Dave Chappelle video came from.
I have no idea.
I think it's a secret plot from YouTube. Just pull down videos randomly from the internet. Speaking of secret plots, the NSA has reportedly penetrated RSA deeper than we originally thought. This is based on some research work that's been done, and Reuters is reporting on this exclusively. A group of professors from Johns Hopkins, the University of Wisconsin, and the University of Illinois, and elsewhere now say that they have discovered that a second NSA tool exacerbated the RSA software vulnerability. The professors found that the tool, known as Extended Random Extension for the secure websites, could help crack a version of RSA's dual elliptic curve software tens of thousands of times faster, according to an advanced copy of the research shared with Reuters, which hasn't been published yet. So another blow to RSA. And when contacted, RSA did not deny this. RSA's like, oh, yeah.
Well, I think they learned their lesson last time they tried to deny.
Yeah, RSA's like, yeah, it turns out the NSA kind of screwed us. We don't like that. Yeah. All right, on our next roundup story, is this one of our last ones too? FTC settles with Fandango credit karma over SSL issue in mobile apps. What is this about?
This Fandango app claimed that it was protecting your data with SSL, but it turns out the app wasn't actually verifying the SSL certificates, and otherwise wasn't securing your data as the way they claimed they were, and so it was false advertising.
So they're crediting users with karma, I guess. Is that what they call it? Some sort of...
I don't know. I think that was what the app... But the point is that the company is getting in trouble because they claim to be securing stuff with SSL when they weren't.
And our last roundup story is a visual example of how SQL joins work. Well, look at you with the visuals.
Yeah, well, I saw that on Twitter the other day, and I was like, that's a good explanation of how that works.
Yeah.
And I thought that might be useful to people.
Yeah. If you're listening on the audio version, you can go catch the link for that. That's really
Plus,
great.
who doesn't love a good Venn diagram?
Look at that. The Twitter is full of the goods for the roundup this week. Telling you, Alan, I think that Twitter is going to take off. I'm watching it. I'm staying skeptical. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this week's TechSNAP. We'd love to have you join us live. We do TechSNAP on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
There you go. And jblive.info if you need a lower bandwidth audio-only version, or maybe you're just a fan of the theater of the mind, go to jblive.info, and we have a 128 kilobit stream and a 64, 63 kilobit stream where you can listen. And go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to just get that converted in your local time. And don't forget, we'd love to get your emails, so click on that contact link while you're over there and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down and send in your questions. All right, Alan, we're all done. We survived it. I think we avoided any April Fool's news stories as far as I know. It's always hard to tell this week, but I think we made it. So have a great week, Alan. We'll see you next week. And thank you, everyone, for tuning this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.